Hey guys, it's me, cyoubx, and in this video I want to talk a little bit about how to improve in cubing, how to actually just practice, some things to look out for, and especially if you're like me, some tips to get back to where you once were. What you're watching here is an 11.93 casual turning average of 12, with an 11.09 average of 5, and an 8.64 full step single. I say casual turning, but keep in mind that this is not necessarily slow turning. I would say this is about 80% of my full TPS that I would use in an actual solve if I were to compete. The cube I'm using is a Waylong GTS with magnets. I'll be making videos about magnetic cubes and what I think about them in the coming days or maybe a week. But for now, I guess what I'll say is that this cube is pretty good, but it's not without flaws. In this video, I really do just want to focus on how to actually improve. So when I did my first average of 12 when I got back into cubing, so this was like a couple weeks ago, the average was like 16 seconds. And it was a little bit frustrating because as I was solving, I knew exactly what I was doing wrong and what I needed to improve, but it just wasn't that easy to actually improve. For me, the biggest difficulties were actually just dexterity and endurance. I got really tired after just a few solves because I just wasn't used to holding the cube and gripping it the way that I used to. And so I got tired really quickly. So my first couple solves were maybe like 14 seconds or so, but then the times just kept going up, and so I just called it a day for the first day that I got back into it. So I felt like my look ahead actually didn't really suffer that much from the time that I last cubed and when I picked it back up again. But something that I noticed for sure that got worse was my cross to F2L transition and cube rotations. Those two things were absolutely terrible for my times, and those were the two things that I really wanted to focus on getting rid of in order to improve. So something that has really helped me in the past couple weeks to go from 16 seconds to now sub 12 is basically to go pretty slow and then pick up the pace as you go. In particular, slow down at places that you're trying to improve. So for me, I was trying to improve the cross to F2L transition, so my cross was pretty slow. I didn't spam TPS because I didn't want that really big pause. So instead, I solved cross pretty slowly, tried to look for the first F2L pair, and went from there. In this particular average, I was also trying to work on look ahead, so I did F2L fairly casually as well so that I could actually look ahead and pause less. But the last thing that I was really focusing on in this average was recognizing the last layer and being able to execute the algorithms without locking up too much. So something that I've noticed with this GTS with magnets is I actually lock up more on this than I did before I put in the magnets, and that has everything to do with the new tensions that the cube is on. So in order to get used to the new turning style of the cube, it's good to just go slow and practice your turning accuracy. The magnets obviously help with that anyway, so it's not too hard to adjust. But just doing things like that can really help improve your solves when you go at full speed as well. Because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get rid of this time pressure that you usually put on yourself to actually focus on what you need to improve. And after you do a lot of these solves, it'll sort of solidify, and then you can go faster and faster instead of trying to go at full speed right away. So these types of exercises I find very useful if I'm just warming up. So before like a long session, I'll do this for the first few solves, and it's really good for cooldown as well. I don't know about you guys, but for me, after a really long average, my hands do still get a little bit sore, and so after a couple hundred solves, the times definitely do start to go up, and that's when I call it quits and I say, okay, you know what, maybe I'm done for today in terms of going at full speed. Let's take a step back and actually just slow down and practice some of the things that I've noticed are maybe not good enough. I think it's also really good to be realistic about yourself. So for me, I know exactly what can be improved as I'm solving. I don't need to watch myself to know that I'm pausing during F2L or I'm doing inefficient pairing. Like, those things are all obvious to me just even during the solve. But if you're not someone who can focus on that while you solve because you're trying to focus just on the solve, which is fine, you should maybe record yourself and play back those recordings and just actually watch your own solves and see where you're pausing and other mistakes that you're making. I think the reason it works so well is because presumably you're solving casually because this is a very comfortable pace for you. And so if you're making mistakes at this comfortable pace, you know that that's something that you really need to work on. But also, because you're going at such a slow pace, it's pretty easy for you to work on those things without affecting the flow of the rest of the solve. So this is just my sort of general tip to help you improve if you're at a plateau or something like that. This has helped me tremendously in the past week, just going from 16 seconds down to sub 12. And today I did, I think, an 11.26 average of 50. So hopefully this does help you. Again, I will be making a video talking about magnetic cubes in the future, but for now, toodles.